Hello, my name is Daniel White, also known as Dansky. I'm a designer and instructor with Envato, and in this advanced Photoshop course, we're going to be creating some highly creative album artwork, and this will involve compositing multiple images together, adjusting the lighting, submerging half of the design in water, and adding plenty of visual effects too. For this course, we're also going to be using some assets from Envato, the unlimited creative subscription. Find and download quality graphics, templates, photos, and fonts. Follow the link in the description and start creating now. Let's open up Photoshop and get started. Right, so we're now in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, create a new document. Now what I'm going to do is set the dimensions to, we'll go for millimeters, and we're going to go for 120 wide and 120 high. This was the dimensions of a CD back in the day, and I'm going to keep the resolution at 300. If you are designing solely for print, you can go with CMYK for the color mode, but because I might be presenting this online in a variety of different places, I'm going to keep this as RGB, which is essentially more suited for designing for screens. So if in doubt, just follow these measurements, 300 resolution and RGB. For the color mode, we just get a few more colors in that spectrum. Let's click create, and there we go. We have our blank canvas to work on. Now, the first thing to do is plan out your design, your composition, and you can do this by sketching or you can do it in your head. I often just kind of come up with ideas in my head. And let's go over to Envato. This is where I grab probably most of my creative assets. Honestly, this platform is amazing. As you can see, many different categories. If you're doing this kind of photo manipulation stuff in Photoshop, I cannot recommend their 3D library enough, because you can do this, which is really cool. Let's go acoustic, guitar, and you can of course search for many different things. And we've got these 3D graphics. Let's scroll down. I think this one here, this is the one that I'm going to be using in this design. And you can scroll down and view a 360 render. And then what we can do is move this around. So you can kind of get the perfect angle. It might be something like that or straight on. And then you can download that as a PNG or a PSD file. And both of these come with transparency. So we don't need to cut out any products. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of images here that I'm going to be using. There's also some brushes that are from Envato as well. Again, their brush collection, as you'll see, I've got loads of them installed and they are incredible. These are all the assets we're going to be using. So the first thing I'm going to do is open all of these in Photoshop. So let's open those. There we go. And now I need to select all, copy, and switch back to the main document. And basically just take a second to get all of the different assets into the document. So for something like this, I can right click, duplicate layer, and duplicate that into untitled one, which I will name that file in a minute. So I'm just going to take a second now to get all of these into the main document. And of course, many of these layers are massive. I'm going to hide some of these ones that I don't need right now, and I'm going to need to name all these layers as well. So let's do that quickly now. And as you can see, some of these are rather large. So what I'm going to do is select these layers, press Command or Control T for free transform. And then we can scale this down, holding Shift, and just kind of get this at a more acceptable size. So I think something like that will look good. I want to divide the design in half, so half of it will be underwater. So it makes sense to position the wave in the middle there. Okay, let's turn that one off. Let's grab the underwater one, Command or Control T. We're going to just free transform that one down as well. And size this up. I don't want all the sun rays coming through there. I just want the blue part of the water. I'm probably going to zoom in quite far on that. Double click, there we go, that's good. And we've got the rocks, so let's get those in position. And I've also got the eagle as well. Of course, this fella's massive, so let's shrink him down. Nice and tiny. We'll come back to that right at the end because that's like a really tiny detail. So let's turn him off there. We've got the rock. Now this rock is absolutely massive. What I'm going to do is scale this down. Now this is a JPEG, so I do need to cut this out, but we can make this incredibly easy by using one of the selection tools. I think let's just go for object selection. I think it will do a pretty decent job. There we go, just like that. Let's add a layer mask. And there we go, we now have a rock. So what I'm going to do is use these to build effectively a kind of like a seabed of sorts with rocks and bits and pieces. And you can of course use different types of rocks. So I'm just duplicating this with Command or Control J. If you use different rocks as well, you'll get more randomness and it might feel a bit more real. Or you can do it the really quick and lazy way, which is just duplicating the rocks, rotating them, and you can even distort them a little bit as well. So let's just position them there. There we go. So just using that one rock, we've created lots of different rocks. And they're going to be underwater anyway, so they are kind of obscure. Now I think I'm missing an image, and that is of course the waves. So let's go and get that one in as well. We don't want to forget that. We need some sky. Let's copy that in. Paste. Again, we're going to need to zoom out and bring that down. And what I'm going to do now is take the wave surface, move that above, turn it on, and then I'm going to add a layer mask and then grab the brush tool. Make sure black is selected. And we're going to use one of Photoshop's default nice soft brushes. Let's go for this one here. And we can use the left and right square brackets to adjust that brush size. And we're just going to brush away all the blue. Pretty much all we need is really kind of the actual surface wave. And then a little bit of the blue underneath. And this probably would make it considerably easier if I moved it above everything else. There we go, just so I can see what I'm doing. And you can see I'm brushing in black now. Make sure you do have your layer mask selected, otherwise you are going to be painting directly on the layer and we don't want to do that. And I'm just going to grab this bark texture as well. This will go on the guitar. So if I just move that in position, I'll probably need to resize that a little bit. It's quite large. And it's only really for the body of the guitar. Oh no, I think I will include the neck as well. So let's rotate that texture sideways. In fact, what we can do is let's just have it once there and duplicate it. And we'll go edit, transform, and we'll flip it and move it up. This way I can keep the texture a bit more smaller. Otherwise it could be a little bit too large. We'll merge those together with Command or Control E. And then if we hover between these layers, I can hold down Alt or Option and add this as a clipping mask, and it clips the texture to the guitar. So we'll come back to that later, but that's pretty much how it's going to look. Okay, so now we need to start making everything look like it's underwater. And there's a million different ways we're going to do this. The way I'm going to do it is, what am I going to do? I'm going to start by adding a solid color layer. We're just going to pick a blue. There we go, something like that. And I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. And then go back and change the color a bit more. Okay, soft light's not really working too well. So let's go back to normal. And we could bring that down. We could do something like this. And maybe make it a little bit more oceany, something like that. And the first thing we need to do, of course, is select the mask, grab that brush tool again, and brush away everything that is above the water, because we want this to only affect what is under the surface. So let's just quickly brush that away, remove it all from the sky. There we go, just so we don't have any water floating in the sky. That would be a bit strange. And again, let's go back in here and play around with that color. We could make this darker. We could even increase the opacity. Let's try something much darker. And actually something else we need to do is we need to select this layer here. I'll call this sky. And then we're going to add a layer mask and remove that because it's looking a bit weird and throwing me that the ocean's there. And remember, we're using a different underwater image. for the ocean. So let's brush that away. There we go. Now let's go back to this layer. Let's try a blue again. There we go. That looks a little bit better underwater. So we've got one layer there. Let's duplicate that color layer and we'll try a slightly darker one. We'll try and build these up a little bit. And maybe we'll change. There we go. We'll try that one at soft light again. Yeah, make it a bit brighter. There we go. Let's just hide that wave thing. And now I'm going to turn on the underwater image. I think I might actually scale this down a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Just get some background rocks and bits and pieces in there as well. Why not? We may as well work with it. Let's double click to set that transformation. And what I can do is mask this away a little bit more as well. So again, we're just selecting the layer mask and using black. I wonder if I could actually bring a bit of the ocean up here. Maybe we could use a bit of that distant ocean. And what we could try and do is blend that wave over with a multiply. Bring it down. And then just brush away a little bit of the sky. Yeah, that could work. There we go, something like this. We might need to move the sky back underneath the other bits and pieces. So we've just got to brush away all those solid color adjustment layers that extend up into the sky. And we could do the same for the one below. Instead, let's just delete the layer mask, hold Alt or Option and drag this one because they're functioning very, very similarly. And I think I'll make this bottom color a bit blue. Remember, all of this is fully editable, so we really can play around with this. And there we go. That's not a bad start. So what I'm going to do now is work on the other underwater elements. So we've got the rocks here. We can delete the original one. Let's grab these four and drag them underneath as well. So these are now underwater. And we're going to need to adjust the lighting for all of these. So first of all, let's select the guitar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go hue saturation. I'm going to check colorize, make it blue. And then just make the guitar blue like this. If I turn this off and on, you can see the difference. And let's just mask away any of that colorize effect above the water. So we're just making it blue under the water. Drop the opacity down just a little bit. There we go. It just makes everything feel a bit more underwater. And I'm also going to add an exposure adjustment layer. You can, of course, use levels and curves. And I'm just going to bring that over there. And then push the gamma correction there. So if you want to make it darker, do something like this and have these in a line. If you want to make it lighter, you kind of go the other way like that. And these kind of three sliders should all be in pretty much a straight line, more or less. So let's make that much darker. It's underwater, so it's harder to see. And again, let's just mask that out above water so it's not being affected. And now let's do the same for the rocks. So we're just going to add, well, let's do a different technique now. So we'll learn another technique. We'll do curves this time. We'll clip it and we'll just grab this right point here and drag this straight down. Something like that. If you want a little bit more contrast, just give it a slight bend there as well. And we're making this darker because it's underwater as well. And I'm just going to brush away that effect. We'll do it very, very subtly along that top edge. And what this does is it makes it look like there are shadows along the bottom and the light coming from the surface is just touching that rock. We've also got to factor in that it's behind this other rock here. So I might switch to white and just brush in some shadows there being cast by this rock on the right. So let's do that again. Now I'm going to drag this adjustment layer holding Alt-Option, add a layer mask, and add a clipping mask, sorry, and then delete that and we have a fresh mask. It just saves creating the curves adjustment layer again every time. Right, which rock are we on now? This one over here. Okay, so light coming from the top. So I'm just going to brush that away there. And we'll do the same for this rock now. This is what I should have given them numbers, rock 1 through 4. And you can see those there are they're looking a bit more underwater now. And the lighting is a little bit more correct. And we can do the same for the tall rocks. We've got this layer here. Curves, we'll just drag that down. Remember, you can use curves or exposure. Give it a little bend to bump the contrast up there. And then we'll just remove that from the top. Or you can press Command or Control I to invert the mask. And then just brush in underneath, if that's easier. And you can see it's affecting everything. So I'm just going to hold Alt-Option and click between the layers to add that as a clipping mask. And again, it's quite near the surface up here. So maybe I'll have it a little bit lighter towards the top and darker down the bottom. So we could actually go and make that even darker. There we go, like super, super, super dark. And of course, we need to do the same for the guitar as well. So we could do that with curves, or we'll do exposure again this time. I'm just kind of switching it up really just to show you how different techniques can be used. So we'll make that much, much darker. And let's just brush that away there. And there's light coming from the top, so we'll brush a bit of that top part away as well. And when you're balancing exposure like this, is a trick that I like to use all the time. That's going to the top of the layer stack. We're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, bring the saturation all the way down so the whole graphic becomes completely black and white. And then what I can do is I can look and see where the exposures are balanced correctly and where they're not. So for example, here, the neck of the guitar is very, very, very dark. These rocks behind look as though they need a bit more contrast. They look a little bit kind of washed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and add some contrast with the curves layer. We'll just make a slight S bend here. Real subtle, bring that down. And you can see there's a little bit more balance now between this part of the guitar and the rocks. This is before and this is after. And if I turn off these underwater layers as well, you can see here, it's probably too dark now. So I need to go back to the guitar and maybe bring that exposure layer up. And then maybe on the curves, on the rocks as well. Just dial that one back a bit. Ah, there we go. That's the one. Just bring that up because it's just a little bit too dark. And I think with the sky, that's just a bit too bright as well. So I'm going to just add a little bit of contrast just to the sky. So maybe bring that down. Push that up. And that's why I like to use this technique of having everything black and white, because you can then balance exposure before you balance the colors. So let's have a look at that and turn back on the water layers. And there we go. We can see it's starting to slowly come together. Let's just go and refine this mask a little bit here. And I think actually these two layers, I'm going to brush a little bit away from these as well. So there's more light coming from the surface. So I'm just going to run that over the top there. Maybe the same with this one. Maybe just this one. Yeah, there we go. So we just have a lot more light coming from the surface. Nice. And I could even actually darken that bottom part using the same technique. So we could add a curves adjustment layer. and bring that down. Oof, that's quite dark there. Let's invert the mask and we'll just brush that in. And it does make that underwater area get much darker and murkier as it goes lower. We could even change the curves here to the blue channel. We could make that a little bit more blue. Maybe bump up the blue and then grab the green from the middle. We could bump up the green as well. So this is what the layer does. Just makes it a little bit darker and murkier towards the bottom. And also I need some more shadows on the guitar as well. So let's go and add curves or exposure. It doesn't really matter too much. Let's bring that down, invert it, and then I'm just going to brush in some shadows around where those rocks are. Now something else I'm also going to do is take the image of the sky and let's add a solid color adjustment layer. We'll pick a similar color as the sea. Let's change the blending mode to, we'll go for color. Clip it to the sky, invert it, and we're just going to brush along the ocean surface. Now this is of course very, very blue indeed. There we go. We don't want that bleeding onto the sky too much. And I'm doing this just to make sure it matches the kind of rest of the sea a bit more. And I'll drop that opacity down a bit. And you can see it just changes the color of the water, just making it a little bit more blue and blending these two halves together a little bit more seamlessly. Something like that. There we go. Now another adjustment layer we can use is color balance. So I could click the tall rocks here. We've got a very kind of pinky, whatever color this is. It's a lovely color, but we've got that very bright sky. So let's go to the top of the layers above the tall rocks and add a color balance adjustment layer. Clip that to the rocks. And what I can use this to do is adjust the colors in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So for example, I could push this to the right and introduce more red, and you can see now the rocks become much, much more red in the midtones, and that's pretty good actually. As you can see, you can go very extreme with this, but we could kind of pull that a little bit of blue. So just by adjusting the midtones, if I turn this off and on, you can see the difference that makes, particularly above the water, kind of matching the lighting of the sky. Now we can use this technique on the items underwater as well. That's one way you can introduce a bit more blue, but we don't really need to because we've kind of taken care of that another way anyway. And I think those tall rocks as well, I'm just going to add a layer mask. I'm actually just going to trim the top of the rocks. We're going to do a little bit of rock surgery. There we go. Let's go along like this. Let's just hide the guitar a second so I can see what I'm doing. And it's a bit soft, so I might need to go along that top edge with a smaller brush, just so I get a harder edge. I don't want the edge looking too soft and fluffy because, of course, well, after all, these are rocks. There we go. I think that looks pretty decent. Nice. And with the guitar, what I can also do is I could add an adjustment layer to this as well, a curves one. And we could bring that down and make it darker. I'm looking at the top of the guitar mostly. Maybe pull it down a little bit there. And then on that right side, we're just going to brush in black because there's light coming from over here. So we're just going to have that sort of light spilling over onto this side of the guitar. So you can see the left side is a bit darker. Maybe not that dark. We're just trying to kind of correct the lighting so it matches all of the images, or all of the images that we're blending together, they all kind of match each other. Now let's turn on that delicious bark texture again. You can see, well, it looks like that. What we can do is right click this and go to blending options though. And we can grab, it's one of these, I forget which one. We'll hold Alt or Option and click to separate this. No, it's not that one. I always get it the wrong way around. This side here. Click and drag, and you can see it blends that texture through onto the guitar. Now, if we just grab this whole slider, it does it very harshly. So we want to separate this really gradually. And you can see you get that texture blending through, particularly underwater. And we could try and play around with some blending modes as well. So we could try a darken or a multiply maybe, or ooh, soft light, that looks good. Yeah, maybe soft light, that looks pretty decent. And we can't see it as much underwater because we've made it quite dark. And this is the point where you will go backwards and forwards and you can play around with all this stuff. So it's a case of turning layers off, turning them back on, and just playing around with the exposure a little bit more. In fact, let's go back into those texture settings and we'll try and blend that from the right as well. I think that might make things look a little bit better. Let's try normal, we'll bring that down. Yeah, there we go, that looks a little bit better. So it's just a case of playing around with blending modes and opacity, and you can get something that looks pretty decent. Okay, so now I'm going to take everything that I've done and just spend a few minutes cleaning all of this up and just polishing everything up ever so slightly. There we go, looking pretty good. Now let's just save the document quickly. Let's call it Invato. There we go, we're saved, all good. Now I'm going to add a few more visual effects. So let's go to the top of the layer stack and I'm going to add a new solid color. Let's hide this layer a minute and click on the thumbnail. I'm going to pick the color, something like this. So we're going to use this to add a highlight similar to the sky. We'll invert that. Select the brush tool, bring the opacity down nice and low to like, ooh, let's go for 10%. There we go. With a nice white brush, we'll bring that up. So we're positioning the cursor around here. And we're just going to click, bring it down and keep clicking as we get smaller. And this is one way that you can just add a bit of lighting to one side, or if you've got the sun peeking around the side, you can kind of use this to add like a little bit of a glow or a flare to your design. And something else we can do is we can actually go and refine this even more. So we'll do an exposure adjustment layer on the tool rocks, make those darker. And then we're going to just brush away with black. Make sure you crank the opacity back up, don't forget that. We're just going to brush away on the right hand side. This is where the light's kind of primarily coming from. So anywhere that would be kind of affected by the lighting, we're just going to brush that in there like so. Maybe a bit there. And maybe it's just spilling over a tad here. Let's turn that off and on. So you can see that does make it quite dramatic, and we can just dial that back a little bit. Now we've got the highlights, the lighting in the right place, we can then adjust how dark it is. There we go, nice. And we could even try making the underwater area a little bit darker. Let's go to the top of all of these layers. We'll add a solid color adjustment layer. We'll make it again. We're going to go for blue. And let's play around with the blending modes. We'll try this. Sorry, the blending options. This may or may not work. There we go. That. Yeah, this could work actually. Let's see how that looks. Maybe a blending mode on top. Let's turn it off and on. Oh yeah, I do quite like that. We'll keep that in, I think, and just remove it from the sky. So we're just affecting the water. And maybe even the wave surface. Let's go and add a levels adjustment layer to that. This can be curves, of course, as well. And I'm just gonna, let's just make sure we only affect that layer. Gonna bring maybe some of the shadows down and just try and accentuate that kind of dividing line a bit more. Maybe not too much. But something we definitely need to go and change that does look a bit strange is the tall rocks. So let's go and work with the layer mask, use a soft brush. At the moment, they're just kind of blending straight through and it looks a bit two-dimensional, whereas in actuality, the rocks would go into the water somewhere about here and then be shown underneath. So what I'm going to do is just try and cut this off here. I think you'll see what I mean in a minute. And I'm doing this with a mouse, so apologies for my slightly unsteady hand. You see what I mean? So it's going into the water here. Let's just follow that through there. Let's maybe go around there. Because it's water, we can freehand this quite easily, and actually my very, well, slightly unsteady hand doesn't really matter too much. We need to do the same for the guitar. So we'll add a layer mask and just brush away part of it there, just that little piece, I think. So it's just going into the water slightly in front of the rocks. That little difference does make a huge impact. So it's little details like that that are definitely worth paying attention to. Now we need to go and add some more shadows to the tall rocks. So I'm switching between different techniques, but you can choose whichever one works best for you. Add a clipping mask, and then we'll invert that to remove it. And then I'm going to brush back in some more shadows where they would appear. So kind of maybe in this sort of crack here, down there, much lower. So kind of the areas where the light just isn't quite reaching. And then definitely right down the bottom. You can see this does make a really big difference. And I know I'm stacking up a lot of adjustment layers. If you can work with fewer adjustment layers, honestly, the better in my opinion. But sometimes I just get carried away and I add them more and more and more. It's a terrible habit. But in the end, it does get the job done. So I think lastly, I'm going to need to add one to the underwater ocean, just to blend in some of those rocks in the background. They do look a little bit kind of faded out. So I'm just going to try and increase the contrast. Yeah, there we go. Actually, I think that looks better overall. So they blend in a little bit more. You can see there, but we get a bit more contrast up here as well. Now, the next thing we're going to do is start using some brushes, and I absolutely love these. So we're going to go here. We'll lock this layer. This is our kind of, we'll call this sun flare, and we'll keep that locked for now. We can just turn that on at the end. I'm going to add a new layer here. Grab the brush tool and let's switch back into bridge. I've got these brushes here, and you can open these in Photoshop by right-clicking opening. I'm just going to drag them like so. You can also load brushes from the cog here, so you can import them there. And it should, as you can see, I've got loads here. And I've got some splash ones here. These are amazing. Oh, honestly, these brushes are so good. So I'm just going to brush in some splashes with white. So like any other brush, you can just make these nice and small, resize them. You can even use the left and right arrow keys to rotate the brush. So where the water here kind of meets the rock, I'm just going to stamp in a splash. If it's not prominent enough, just maybe 1, 2, just do it a couple of times. And then maybe we'll grab a different brush, scale it down. We'll just stamp in some more splashes. This is quite a good brush actually, so maybe I'll just put some splashes there. You can of course take much more care doing this than I'm doing. I'm doing this very quickly, but stamping in brushes is definitely one of my favorite things to do. I honestly love this. And it's one of those things that, again, can make such a massive difference. So let's grab this one. This is like a good one. Here we go. Lots of drama, big splashes. Nice. Love it. There we go. So we've added some splashes. That's like a water spray. We've also got some water splashes as well. So let's see how some of these look. Maybe this one. There's a big splash. I'm going to do this on a separate layer just so I can kind of work with these independently. Let's see how this one looks. We'll stamp it in there. And then I can just kind of resize it a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so we've got some brushes stamped in there, and then we're just going to use the eraser tool. We don't want them to kind of come under the water, so they're kind of splashing upwards on the surface. So we're just going to erase those bits there. So we've got spray and we've got splashes. I'll name those just so I don't forget. You can see the difference it makes here, off and on. And now I'm going to turn the eagle back on and just kind of reposition him at the top here. And I'm just going to repeat all of the different steps that we've done just now, just to kind of blend him in to the rock. So let's change back to a normal brush. There we go. So first I'm just going to brush away the actual rock he's standing on, just part of it. I'm going to blend it into this rock here. So let's add a color balance adjustment layer, clip it to the eagle, just crank up the red. There you go, crank up the blue. See, most of this is in the midtones. You can see that's done most of the work actually. We could just leave that as it is and that would be more than acceptable. A bit of icing on the cake is just adding a curves one, bringing it down like so, just adding some shadows and then brushing out where those shadows wouldn't be. So the light's coming from the right. Yeah, there we go. Nice, super quick and easy. And we now have an eagle on top of the rock. Lovely. Now I'm going to turn that sun flare back on. And there's another type of adjustment layer that I do like to use that is kind of a little bit of icing on the cake. So let's click at the very top, go to the adjustment icon, and we're going to add a color lookup. This is a LUT, which stands for lookup table. And you can think of these as like color profiles. They're used quite a lot in video as well. And honestly, you can just click through these and they do very specific things to the colors. And some of them just look quite wild, but really, oh, I mean, look at this one. Nice, that looks really nice. So they can kind of give your design a very stylized effect. I think I might go for this one here. I'm just going to turn it off for a second and perhaps just use another color balance adjustment layer at the very top, just to try and make the water a little bit more blue. There we go. And I don't want this to affect the top of the image, so we're just going to keep that to the sea, the underwater area. Just brush it away with that soft brush. There we go, just a bit more blue. Then let's turn on the color lookup layer. And maybe I'll change that to a different one. Maybe something like that looks good. And we don't have to have it at 100%. We can actually bring that down and just start increasing it. I think something like maybe 30%. Yeah, that's enough. That looks pretty decent. And what we're going to do now is add a new layer and add some text. So let's grab our type tool. I'm going to give this album a name. We'll call it Still Waters. Let's change the color to white. Make sure it's centrally aligned. And I'm going to use the font. Where is it? Amandine. Yeah. Ooh, let's go for medium. This is a beautiful font. Still water. Let's add that S. Still waters. There we go. And we'll position this half above the water, half under the water. I think that looks pretty good. Now I've got that in position. Maybe nudge it up just a pinch. What I'm going to do is duplicate it and then hide this layer. So I've got this editable version of the text here. And then I'm going to right click on the text layer and convert this to a smart object. I'm also going to duplicate this again. And this is going to be the text. We'll call it bottom. This is the underwater part. So first of all, what I'm going to do is go to filter, and I think we'll go to distort, and we'll try ripple. There's lots of different techniques we can use here. Yeah, let's just try that one. That doesn't look too bad. We could also change the blending mode. So maybe overlay or maybe soft light. That's quite nice, quite subtle. Another one that you could try using is wave. That can work quite nicely as well. And I think what I'm going to do is have motion blur as well. I don't want to add too much, but just a little bit of motion blur, a really tiny amount at this kind of angle to match the motion of the sea. So it's a really tiny, subtle difference, but it can look pretty cool. And now let's mask away that top area with the brush tool. So everything above the surface, we're going to remove that. And we could, of course, add splashes to the letters as well. Let's turn on that top half. Let's add a layer mask. And now we're just going to remove the bottom. So we're kind of getting rid of that white from the bottom area, and you can see it kind of has the underwater wibbly wobbly half there as well. So we've now separated the text into two halves. And in fact, I don't want the text, just like the rocks in the guitar, to run straight through. I want to kind of have a small brush and have them finish somewhere here in the water. So it actually looks a bit more realistic, like they are going into the water. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. We've got the top half there and the bottom half. And if you want to, you can add a name up here as well. So I'm just going to click. We'll go Stephen Jays White. This person is a relative of mine and a very talented musician. So let's credit the album to him up there. There we go. Maybe a slightly thicker weight for that font, so it's a bit bolder. And then with the text under the water, we could actually even just mask that away a little bit more, just brushing in the bottom part. So it's kind of, the letters really are just sort of blending into the water a little bit more. You see, really, really subtle. And of course, you can spend ages finessing this, but one of my favorite things to do at the very end is to select all, copy merged, and then paste. So that pastes the entire design onto a single layer. And then we'll go and call this final. And we're going to convert this to a smart object. And then let's go up to view. No, let's go up to filter. Let's go up to filter, down to camera raw filter. And there's loads of settings in here you can use to refine this. So from light, for example, we could increase the contrast and the drama and bump up the highlights. Loads of stuff we can play around with. But the effects that I love using the most are texture and clarity. So I'll drag these to the extreme so you can see what I mean. It quite literally does add more texture and more clarity to the design. As you can see, that's a bit too much. And this will depend on the design, but just by dragging up the texture and the clarity together, you really can just make your design stand out. It just does something that can make certain designs look much, much better. We could also introduce a little bit of grain. If you're like me and you like that in your design, when you're working with 3D graphics and shapes, they come in and they're like perfectly clean. Whereas when you're blending them with photos, photos can often have noise in them or a bit of grain. So by adding grain to everything, you just kind of blend it all together a bit more. And another thing we could add is maybe a little vignette, a real subtle one, just to darken those edges. A little before there. You can see what this effect does. And if it is just a bit too strong, just bring back the texture and the clarity ever so much, and then click OK. This is saved as a camera raw filter adjustment layer. So you can edit it, you can double click it, go back in, change the settings, or you can delete it entirely. And if you want to carry on working on your design, the way you update it is quite simple, really. We just hide this. You carry on working on all of the layers below. And then when you've made some changes, so let's just say I want to change the name or remove the name. I'll remove the name. I'll select all, copy merged, double click to go back inside the smart object, paste in the new version. You can give these numbers. I like to kind of give these numbers so I can remember the kind of steps involved. And then all you do is save this smart object, close it down, and then turn this layer back on. And using all of these tools and techniques, if you spend a bit longer on it, you can end up with something that looks like this. And something else we can do once you've finished your design is go back to Envato. We can search through their graphic templates. As you can see, we've got loads of different mockups here. This could be for CDs, it could be for vinyl, anything you like really. They've got tons of different mockups. You can see I've picked this one here, so I could download this. It's got a bunch of different views. And if we jump back into Photoshop, you can see I've opened up this one here, and all I've got to do really is expand this down. Most of these mockups have a smart object that you can go into, and I've just then really got to copy everything merged, paste that in, adjust the scaling where necessary. There we go. Save and close. And you can see that my design has been applied to the mockup. And let's go in this one here. Same thing again. Let's just copy and paste that design inside the smart object. This is going to be for the vinyl itself. We'll just resize that one. And let's just hide that. We'll hide the red just so it isn't peeking through. Save both of these smart objects, close them down, and there we go. We've got the cover and the vinyl all mocked up. And let's just remove that red strip along the top. And there we go, we have a perfectly clean mockup. And there we go, that's going to do it for this course. Hopefully you learned a bunch of new tricks and tips. And once again, a big thank you to Envato for having me here on their channel. Take care, and I'll see you soon.